At my grandson's 5th birthday, my daughter-in-law, Serafina, laughed as she told me I was too old to understand modern parenting. She then paraded him around, ignoring my existence entirely. I just smiled, hiding a secret. Soon, her laughter turned to tears when she realized her entire meticulously planned future had just crumbled. Like, share, and let me know the city you're listening from. You won't believe what happened next. The shrill ringing of the telephone tore through the serene quiet of Eleanor's early morning, startling her so badly she almost dropped her cup of chamomile tea. It was barely 7 on a Tuesday, the time of day when her small cottage was usually bathed in the gentle glow of the rising sun, filled only with the comforting sounds of birdsong and the soft rustle of newspaper pages. A call at this hour rarely brought good news. Her heart gave a nervous thump even before she recognized the number on the caller ID. Serafina. Her daughter-in-law. Eleanor swallowed, a familiar knot tightening in her stomach. She braced herself, taking a slow, steadying breath before answering. "Hello, Serafina?" A frantic, breathless voice exploded through the receiver. "Eleanor. Oh my God. You have to help us. It's Leo. He's really sick, Eleanor. Really sick. We need $50,000, immediately, for urgent medical tests." The words hit Eleanor like a physical blow. "Leo? Sick? What are you talking about, Sarah? What happened?" Her mind reeled, picturing her lively, bright-eyed 5-year-old grandson. Her initial shock quickly morphed into a profound sense of dread, but it was a dread mixed with something else, something heavier, more cynical. This wasn't the first time Serafina had called with an urgent plea for money, framed around an emergency. Over the past 3 years, Serafina had bled Eleanor dry of over $100,000, a sum Eleanor had meticulously saved from her pension after years of dedicated service as a nurse. Each time, there was a different crisis. A sudden car repair that cost more than a new vehicle, an unexpected tax bill that threatened to ruin their lives, a can't-miss investment opportunity that vanished into thin air. Each time, Serafina's tone had been tinged with desperation, laced with just enough emotional blackmail to twist Eleanor's arm. And each time, Eleanor, still grieving for her son Arthur, Serafina's late husband, had succumbed, her love for Leo clouding her judgment. She wanted to believe the money was truly for her grandson's well-being, a final act of support for Arthur's family. Now, it was Leo's health on the line, allegedly. Eleanor's professional instincts, honed over decades in the medical field, kicked in. "What's wrong with him, Serafina? What are the symptoms? Which hospital are you taking him to? Has he been admitted?" She kept her voice steady, attempting to cut through the hysterics with a calm, clinical approach. "It's complicated, Bessie," Serafina replied, her voice abruptly losing some of its frantic edge, a slight impatience creeping in. "You wouldn't understand all the medical terms. It's a very rare condition, and they need to run these incredibly expensive tests right away." Eleanor bristled at the dismissive Bessie, a nickname Serafina often used when she wanted to imply Eleanor was old-fashioned or out of touch. "I might understand more than you think, Serafina," she stated, a steeliness entering her tone. "I'm a retired nurse, remember? Tell me the name of the doctor, or the hospital. I can call them directly. Or even better, I can come with you. I'm sure I can help interpret the information from the doctors." A sharp intake of breath on Serafina's end, then a snap. "No, that won't be necessary. It's all very sensitive. And besides," her voice suddenly softened, becoming cloyingly sweet. A manipulative switch Eleanor knew all too well. "Leo has been asking for you, Grandma. He misses you so much. If only you could see him right now, so fragile, asking for his grandma to make him better. Your poor grandson needs you, Eleanor." Eleanor closed her eyes, a wave of exhaustion washing over her. The emotional manipulation was relentless. She pictured Leo's sweet face, the way he would run to hug her, his bright laughter. Was he truly sick? Or was this just another performance? Her heart ached with the conflict. But years of experience, both as a nurse and as a mother who had lost a child, had taught her the importance of truth, especially when it came to health. Sarah, Eleanor said, her voice firm despite the tremor in her heart. I need you to be honest with me. Is Leo really sick? Or is this another one of your schemes for money? The sweetness vanished instantly, replaced by an icy coldness that sent a shiver down Eleanor's spine. Seraphina's voice dropped to a low, venomous whisper. How dare you, Eleanor? How dare you question me when your grandson is suffering? Arthur would be ashamed of you. He would be absolutely disgusted to see you treat his family like this. The mention of Arthur, her beloved son, was a cruel, calculated blow. It ripped through Eleanor, stirring a surge of raw, protective anger she rarely displayed. Arthur had been gone for 5 years, and his memory was sacred. Don't you dare, Eleanor retorted, her voice shaking with controlled fury. Don't you dare use my son's name to manipulate me, Seraphina. If Leo is truly sick, then prove it. Send me the medical reports. Show me something, anything, that isn't just your word. The line exploded with Seraphina's rage. You selfish old woman. You've always been so critical, so distrustful. You think I'm lying? Fine. Don't help us. But if you don't send that money by noon, then don't you dare call here again wanting to see Leo. You won't ever see your grandson again. You hear me? Never. The dial tone buzzed loudly in Eleanor's ear as Seraphina abruptly disconnected the call. Eleanor slowly lowered the phone, her hand trembling. The silence that followed felt deafening, heavy with unspoken threats and a gnawing fear. Her vision blurred with tears, her mind a whirlwind of agony and defiance. She loved Leo more than anything in the world, and the thought of losing him, of never seeing his bright smile again, was unbearable. But her gut, her nurse's intuition, and her grandmother's protective instinct screamed that something was terribly wrong. And it wasn't just with Leo's health. She had stood her ground. She had demanded the truth. But at what cost? Had she just sacrificed her relationship with her grandson for the sake of a principle? She was torn, heartbroken. But in the deepest part of her soul, Eleanor knew she had done the right thing. Eleanor sat at her kitchen table, the silence in the room echoing the void Seraphina's threat had left. The phone lay beside her, a black, inert rectangle, a symbol of the cruel ultimatum. Her heart still pounded with a mix of fury and fear. Just as she was about to surrender to the crushing weight of despair, contemplating a future without Leo, the phone jolted back to life, vibrating urgently across the polished wood. Her gaze snapped to the screen. It was an unknown number, but something, an almost imperceptible premonition, urged her to answer. Hello? Eleanor's voice was tentative, a whisper of hope. A small, hesitant voice, barely audible, trickled through the receiver. Grandma Bessie? Eleanor gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. It was Leo, her grandson. Her heart leaped, then sank with a fresh wave of pain. Why was he calling from an unfamiliar number? Was he truly sick? Leo! Oh, honey, it's Grandma. Eleanor's voice trembled with relief and apprehension. Are you all right? Where are you calling from? There was a sniffle, a small, heartbroken sound that twisted Eleanor's insides. Grandma Bessie, Leo began, his voice a fragile thread. Mommy said, you don't want to see me anymore because I'm sick. The words were a direct hit, a poisoned arrow aimed straight at Eleanor's heart. Seraphina's cruelty was breathtaking, beyond anything Eleanor had imagined. To use a child, her own son, as a pawn in such a vile game, to instill such guilt and fear in a 5-year-old's innocent mind, was monstrous. The pain was sharp, but it quickly ignited a cold, hard resolve within Eleanor. Oh, honey! That's not true at all, Eleanor said, her voice brimming with a fierce, unwavering love, struggling to keep the tremor of outrage from her tone. That's absolutely not true. I love you so much, Leo, more than anything in the world. And I always want to see you. But Mommy said. Leo's voice trailed off, filled with confusion and hurt. Leo, listen to Grandma. Eleanor pressed gently, her nurse's instinct guiding her to the core question. Do you feel sick, honey? Does anything hurt? Your tummy? Your head? Are you tired or dizzy? She needed to hear it from him, to confirm her deepest suspicions. There was a moment of silence, a little rustle on the other end, then Leo's innocent, unburdened reply. "No," he said simply. "I feel fine. I was just playing with my dinosaurs. But Mommy cries a lot and says we need money or something bad will happen. She keeps saying we have to move if we don't get the money." The words, so pure and unadulterated by adult deceit, were all the confirmation Eleanor needed. A cold certainty settled in her heart, chilling her to the bone. Leo wasn't sick, not physically, at least. Serafina wasn't just trying to extort money, she was terrorizing her own son, using his grandmother's love and his supposed illness as a weapon. The rage that surged through Eleanor was unlike anything she had felt before. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about protecting Leo from a toxic, manipulative environment. "Oh, Leo," Eleanor whispered, her voice thick with emotion, her eyes welling up with unshed tears. "You are not sick, and I love you so much. No matter what anyone tells you, that will never change. Do you understand? Grandma loves you." Before Eleanor could promise him a visit, before she could find words to reassure him fully, a harsh, angry voice erupted in the background, unmistakable even through the muffled sounds. "Leo, what are you doing with my phone? Give it here." It was Serafina, her voice sharp and furious. There was a scuffle, a small cry from Leo, and then a click. The line went dead. Eleanor stared at the phone, her heart hammering. The connection to Leo, fleeting and fragile, had been severed. Serafina's cruelty was boundless. That night, sleep was an impossible luxury. Eleanor tossed and turned, the image of Leo's small, confused face haunting her. She thought of Arthur, her sweet son, whose memory Serafina had so callously invoked. Arthur had been a kind, gentle soul, and he would have been devastated to see his wife treating his mother and his son with such malice. Eleanor felt a profound, almost spiritual connection to Leo, a living piece of Arthur, a part of her heart she would fight to protect. By the time the first rays of dawn pierced through her bedroom curtains, painting the room in soft hues of gray and rose, Eleanor's mind was clear. The agonizing doubt and fear had solidified into an unshakable resolve. She would not give Serafina the $50,000, not one more penny. But she would not abandon Leo. Never. She would find another way, a different way. Even if it meant going to war with Serafina, even if it meant navigating a treacherous, uncertain path, she would do it. Leo needed her, and she would not fail him. The next 2 weeks were a blur of anxious anticipation and unnerving silence. Her phone, once a source of dread, now lay dormant, a constant reminder of the severed connection. Each vibration, each unexpected chime, sent a jolt of adrenaline through her, only to be met with disappointment. She found herself driving past Serafina's apartment building almost daily, a silent vigil from a distance, hoping to catch a glimpse of Leo, a sign that he was truly okay. She saw Serafina occasionally, rushing in and out, but never Leo. The silence from Serafina was as chilling as her threats, a tense, unspoken waiting game. Eleanor knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that this was far from over. The 2 weeks that followed Serafina's chilling ultimatum and Leo's heartbreaking call were an eternity for Eleanor. Each passing day was a heavy burden, filled with a torturous mix of dread and hope. The rational part of her mind, the one that had been a nurse for decades, was convinced Leo was not physically ill. His innocent voice, declaring he felt fine and had been playing with dinosaurs, resonated with truth. Yet, a grandmother's heart, prone to irrational fears, constantly whispered doubts. What if Serafina had been telling the truth about his sickness after all? What if her refusal of the money had truly condemned Leo to some unforeseen medical fate? The fear of never seeing him again, of him believing his Grandma Bessie no longer loved him, was a constant, icy companion. Then, on a quiet Thursday evening, as Eleanor sat trying to lose herself in a book, the phone rang. She jumped, her heart leaping into her throat. It was Serafina. Eleanor hesitated, her fingers hovering over the receiver, bracing herself for another round of vitriol or a fresh demand. But when she answered, Serafina's voice was entirely different. It was soft, almost trembling, laced with an unfamiliar note of apology. Eleanor? It's me. Serafina. Her voice was hesitant, fragile. I just wanted to apologize for my outburst the other day. I was so scared, so incredibly terrified about Leo. I wasn't thinking straight, and I took it all out on you. It was unforgivable. I hope you can forgive me. A powerful, overwhelming flood of relief washed over Eleanor, so intense it almost buckled her knees. The tension that had gripped her for 2 weeks suddenly began to unravel. "Oh, honey," Eleanor said, her voice catching with emotion. "I was so worried. How is Leo? Is he okay? What happened?" The questions tumbled out, urgent and heartfelt. "He's going to be fine, Bessie," Serafina announced, her voice still soft but now edged with a profound sense of relief. "The doctors, they found a new treatment option. A specialist came forward. And it's covered by insurance. We won't need the money after all. Leo is going to be fine." Eleanor couldn't hold back the tears. They streamed down her face, hot and cleansing, weeks of suppressed fear, guilt, and anxiety pouring out of her. "Oh, thank God," she whispered, barely able to speak through her sobs. "Thank God. I was so scared, Serafina. So scared for him." I know, Serafina said, her voice still gentle, almost soothing. "It was a terrible time. But it's over now. And Leo, he misses you so much, Eleanor. He keeps asking for his grandma Bessie." There was a pause, a carefully timed breath. Would you consider coming for dinner this Sunday? Just us. A quiet dinner. A chance for us to reconcile. For you to see Leo. He'd be so happy." The invitation felt like a gift from heaven, a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. The possibility of seeing Leo, of holding him, and reassuring him of her love, was everything Eleanor had yearned for. The memory of his small, confused voice repeating Serafina's cruel words still haunted her, and she longed to erase that pain from his heart. Eleanor didn't hesitate. "Yes, Serafina, yes. Of course, I'll be there. Thank you. Thank you so much." The rest of the week passed in a haze of joyful anticipation. On Saturday, Eleanor went shopping. She bought Leo the newest, most elaborate dinosaur toy she could find. A roaring, stomping creature that she knew would delight him. She also purchased the ingredients for Arthur's favorite chocolate cake, a rich, dark indulgence that always brought back fond memories of her son. She baked it with extra care, pouring her love into every stir and layer. The thought of Sunday, of the warmth of Leo's hug, filled her with a profound sense of peace. Sunday arrived, bright and clear, matching the lightness in Eleanor's heart. She dressed carefully, choosing a soft, cornflower blue dress that always made her feel elegant and approachable. She dabbed on a touch of her favorite perfume, the same scent she wore when Arthur was little. Her heart was aflutter with a mix of excitement and nervous hope. Reconciliation. It was a beautiful word. She drove to Serafina's apartment building, the familiar route feeling different, imbued with a new sense of purpose. As she pulled up, however, a subtle unease began to prickle at her. The building seemed different, cleaner, newer somehow. The facade appeared recently renovated, and the entrance, usually a modest affair, now boasted polished brass and an imposing new door. And there, standing by the entrance, was a uniformed doorman she had never seen before. He was tall, impeccably dressed, and exuded an air of polite formality. Eleanor parked her car and approached the building. The doorman offered a crisp, professional smile. "Good evening, ma'am. May I help you?" "Good evening," Eleanor replied, a slight frown creasing her brow. "I'm here to see Serafina Thompson." "Apartment 402. The doorman's smile wavered for a fraction of a second, a fleeting flicker of confusion. "Mrs. Thompson, you say? I'm not familiar with that name. Are you sure this is the correct address?" Eleanor felt a jolt of anxiety. "Yes, absolutely. Apartment 402. My daughter-in-law, Serafina Thompson. The doorman consulted a discreet list on his podium. His eyes scanned the names, then he looked up, his expression clearing. Ah, I see. Mrs. Henderson. Apartment 402. You must be Mrs. Henderson's mother-in-law, yes? She mentioned you might be coming. Mrs. Henderson. The name hung in the air, foreign and unsettling. Eleanor's mind raced. Serafina had kept Arthur's surname, Thompson. Even after his death, why would the doorman call her Henderson? The detail felt out of place, a discordant note in her otherwise harmonious anticipation. She pushed the thought aside, dismissing it as a minor anomaly. Perhaps Serafina had moved to a different, nicer apartment within the same building, and the doorman had simply made a mistake. Or maybe she'd remarried? No, that couldn't be right. Serafina would have told her. Eleanor forced a smile. Yes, that's right. Mrs. Henderson. I must have misspoken. She nodded, trying to reassure herself more than the doorman. Please, tell her I'm here. The heavy polished door swung open, revealing Serafina standing in the entryway. Eleanor almost gasped. Serafina looked absolutely stunning, radiating an aura of sophisticated elegance. She wore a sleek, expensive-looking black dress that accentuated her figure, and her hair, usually a messy blonde bun, was styled in perfect, cascading waves. Her makeup was flawless, enhancing her features to an almost unfamiliar degree. A dazzling diamond necklace, clearly new, sparkled at her throat. This was not the distressed, apologetic Serafina from the phone call, nor the perpetually struggling widow Eleanor had known for years. This was a woman of means, and a formidable one at that. Eleanor, you made it, Serafina chirped, her smile bright, almost too bright. Come in, come in. Eleanor stepped inside, and her jaw almost dropped. This was unequivocally not the apartment she remembered. The modest, somewhat cluttered space where Arthur and Serafina had made their home, and where Eleanor had spent countless happy hours with Leo, was gone. In its place was a sprawling, opulent residence. The air smelled faintly of expensive lilies and fresh polish. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a breathtaking cityscape, bathing the vast living area in the warm glow of the setting sun. Sleek, contemporary furniture, clearly designer pieces, graced the impeccably maintained hardwood floors. A magnificent glass chandelier hung suspended from a vaulted ceiling, casting shimmering reflections across the room. Sarah, Eleanor said, her voice laced with genuine confusion. Did you move? This isn't... Serafina waved a dismissive hand, a hint of impatience flickering in her eyes. Oh, Bessie, darling, yes. We upgraded a few months ago. I forgot to mention it, didn't I? Things have been so hectic. Eleanor's mind raced. Upgraded? A few months ago? Serafina had always claimed to be struggling financially, barely scraping by on Arthur's modest life insurance and the occasional odd job. She had no steady income, certainly not one that could afford an apartment like this. Not to mention the new wardrobe and jewelry. The previous $100,000 Eleanor had given her had supposedly been for desperate emergencies, not luxurious upgrades. A cold knot of suspicion began to tighten in Eleanor's stomach, pushing away the earlier relief. Come on, Serafina said, her smile returning, a practiced mask. Leo is so excited to see you. He's just in the dining room. She gestured towards an open doorway, already moving, forcing Eleanor to follow. He's been talking about you all day. Eleanor's heart, despite the growing unease, still fluttered at the mention of Leo. She clutched the dinosaur toy and the chocolate cake box tighter, her hope for a loving reunion momentarily eclipsing her burgeoning doubts. She rounded the corner into the dining room, her gaze sweeping the space, eager to spot her grandson. She stopped dead, her breath catching in her throat. Her heart plummeted. There was no Leo. Instead, a long, gleaming mahogany table, large enough to seat 10, dominated the room. It was set for 8, with gleaming silverware and crystal glasses, but not for a family dinner. Seated around the table were 5 men in impeccably tailored, expensive suits. Their expressions were stern, unsmiling, and professional. Documents, neatly stacked, lay before each of them. The atmosphere in the room was not one of warmth and reconciliation, but of cold, calculating business. Bessie. Serafina's voice cut through the stunned silence, now devoid of any pretense of sweetness or apology. It was sharp, businesslike, almost predatory. I'd like you to meet my legal team. Eleanor's mouth went bone dry. The words echoed in her head, bouncing off the pristine walls. Legal team? Her mind struggled to process the abrupt shift, the brutal unveiling of the deception. Legal team? She managed to croak, her voice barely a whisper. I don't understand. Where's Leo? You said he was here. Serafina's smile was now a thin, tight line. Leo is at a friend's house. I thought it best that adults could talk privately about some very important matters. One of the men, a distinguished-looking man with silver hair and piercing blue eyes, rose from his seat. Mrs. Thompson, he said, extending a hand. I am Mr. Sterling, Serafina's lead attorney. Please, have a seat. He gestured to the empty chair at the head of the table, directly opposite Serafina. Eleanor stood frozen, her hands still clutching the toy dinosaur and the cake. The weight of the items felt absurd, grotesque. In this sterile, hostile environment, the anger, cold and sharp, began to ignite within her. This isn't a reconciliation dinner. Is it? She asked. Her voice quiet but firm. A tremor of fury beneath the surface. This is an ambush. Mr. Sterling remained impassive. We simply wish to discuss a few matters regarding your grandson's future, Mrs. Thompson. Matters that Serafina believes are of utmost importance for Leo's well-being. He gestured to the documents before him. We have prepared a series of papers here, a power of attorney and a transfer of assets. Essentially, they stipulate that you would transfer the title of your house, all of your savings, and your investment portfolio directly to Serafina, for Leo's benefit, of course. Eleanor stared at him, then at Serafina, who now wore an expression of cold triumph. Her blood ran cold. This was it. The ultimate betrayal, all the emergencies, all the manipulation, had been building to this. She felt sick. Bessie. Serafina interjected, her voice suddenly softening. A renewed attempt at emotional manipulation, though it rang hollow now. You're 64 years old. You're not getting any younger. What if something happened to you tomorrow? If you died, what would happen to Leo? Who would protect his future? This is simply a way to ensure he's cared for. Eleanor looked from Serafina to the cold legal faces around the table. The audacity, the sheer, unbridled greed, was staggering. She felt a profound sense of disgust. And if I don't sign? She asked, her voice barely audible, but vibrating with a suppressed rage. Serafina's expression hardened, her veneer of false concern dissolving completely. Her eyes, once apologetic, now blazed with a fierce, unwavering determination. Then I'll have to protect Leo the only way I can. Through the courts. And trust me, Bessie, when this is all over, you will never see your grandson again. Not ever. Eleanor stared at her, the finality of Serafina's words hanging in the air like a death sentence. The rage within her finally broke free. A silent, volcanic eruption. She wouldn't be bullied, she wouldn't be threatened. Not now, not ever. She had lost Arthur, but she would not lose Leo to this conniving, heartless woman. Without another word, without a backward glance, Eleanor turned and walked out of the opulent apartment, leaving the dinosaur toy and the chocolate cake on a polished console table by the door. Serafina's frantic, angry threats and the startled murmurs of the attorneys echoed behind her, fading into the cold, impersonal silence of the hallway. If you're captivated by Eleanor's story of betrayal and resilience, make sure you don't miss a single detail of what happens next. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear a tale of true strength, and subscribe to stay updated on how Eleanor navigates this incredible challenge. Let's continue this journey together. The image of Serafina's cold, calculating face, devoid of any warmth or genuine emotion, seared itself into Eleanor's mind throughout the sleepless night. Each attempt to close her eyes brought forth the memory of the opulent apartment, the stern faces of the lawyers, and Serafina's chilling ultimatum. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound. It wasn't just the money, though that was significant. It was the ruthless manipulation, the emotional blackmail, the exploitation of her love for her grandson, and the casual desecration of Arthur's memory. Eleanor felt foolish, naive, for having fallen for the charade, yet a flicker of resolve ignited within her. She might have been blindsided, but she was not broken. By the first light of dawn, a new determination settled over her. She would understand the full extent of Serafina's deception, piece by painful piece. Her first call that morning was to Miss Davies, her attorney, a sharp, no-nonsense woman Eleanor had known for decades. Miss Davies had handled Arthur's will and various other legal matters for Eleanor over the years, and her calm, rational demeanor was exactly what Eleanor needed. "Eleanor, what on earth happened?" Miss Davies' voice was edged with concern after Eleanor recounted the shocking dinner party. 5 lawyers? That sounds like a hostile takeover attempt, not a family dinner. That's exactly what it felt like, Eleanor sighed, rubbing her temples. She wants me to sign over everything. My house, my savings, my investments. For Leo's benefit, she says. Miss Davies let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Eleanor, let me reassure you immediately. Unless Serafina can prove you're mentally incompetent and from what I hear, you're perfectly lucid and capable, she cannot legally force you to transfer any of your assets. Period. A power of attorney has to be freely given and signed with full understanding. And as for a will, you can leave your assets to whomever you choose." A profound sense of relief washed over Eleanor, easing some of the crushing weight she had carried since Sunday evening. "Thank you, Miss Davies. That's a tremendous comfort. However," Miss Davies continued, her tone thoughtful, "I am concerned about the scale of this. 5 lawyers, Eleanor? That level of legal representation isn't cheap. Serafina must be spending a small fortune. Where is she getting this kind of money?" Miss Davies' question echoed Eleanor's own burgeoning suspicion. Indeed, where was Serafina, with her supposed financial struggles, getting the funds for a lavish new apartment, designer clothes, and a formidable legal team? The pieces of the puzzle, though still scattered, were beginning to take shape. This wasn't a desperate woman clinging to the edges of poverty. This was someone with resources, someone who had carefully planned this ambush. That afternoon, driven by a need for concrete answers, Eleanor decided to take a trip to Serafina's old apartment building. The building, a modest brick structure in a slightly run-down neighborhood, was a stark contrast to the opulent high-rise she had visited on Sunday. As she approached, she saw Mrs. Garcia, the building manager, watering a small patch of flowers by the entrance. Mrs. Garcia, a kindly woman with a warm smile, had always been fond of Eleanor and Leo. "Eleanor, what a surprise!" Mrs. Garcia exclaimed, her face lighting up. "I haven't seen you around here since Serafina moved out. How are you?" Eleanor managed a smile, feigning casualness. "I'm well, Mrs. Garcia. Thank you. Just in the neighborhood." "So Serafina moved, did she? I wasn't quite sure when that happened." "Oh, yes, about 6 months ago, I'd say," Mrs. Garcia replied, straightening up. "Paid off her lease early, which was a shocker. Serafina was always a bit behind on the rent, bless her heart. She must have come into some money, I suppose. Said she was moving to a much nicer place, for Leo's sake. 6 months ago." The words resonated in Eleanor's mind like a chime. 6 months ago. A precise timeline. Her memory, sharp and unclouded, immediately connected this period to a particular emergency call from Serafina. It had been a tearful plea, claiming Leo had been diagnosed with a severe learning disability that required incredibly expensive, experimental treatments not covered by insurance. Serafina had needed $15,000, immediately, to enroll him in a specialized program. Eleanor, worried sick about her grandson, had wired the money without hesitation. Eleanor thanked Mrs. Garcia, made her excuses, and returned to her car. She sat there for a long moment, the engine off, the hum of the city fading into the background. The revelation hit her with the force of a physical blow. The $15,000 she had given Serafina for Leo's learning disability treatments had not gone to any special program. It had, in all likelihood, been used to break her lease and secure a down payment on that luxurious new apartment, or perhaps even a retainer for her formidable legal team. The pieces of the puzzle were indeed falling into place, but the picture they formed was far uglier, far more intricate than Eleanor had initially imagined. Serafina's lies were deeper, more calculated, and had been ongoing for much longer than Eleanor had realized. The depth of the deception was truly chilling. This was not merely about greed. It was about a meticulously orchestrated plan to strip Eleanor of everything she owned. Eleanor knew she needed more information, more proof, before she could truly fight back. But now, she was no longer merely defending herself. She was on the offensive. The realization that Serafina's lies ran far deeper than she had imagined fueled Eleanor's resolve. The pieces of the puzzle, once disjointed and confusing, now clicked into a terrifyingly coherent picture of calculated deception. The next day, with a heavy heart but a clear purpose, Eleanor called Serafina. She knew she had to face her, to expose the truth, but she needed to play a part, to lull Serafina into a false sense of security. "Serafina," Eleanor began, her voice carefully modulated to sound weary but yielding. "After thinking about everything, and for Leo's sake, I believe we need to find a way to work this out. His stability is paramount. Perhaps we can talk more calmly?" Serafina's tone brightened immediately, the cold edge from the previous night replaced by a syrupy sweetness that grated on Eleanor's nerves. "Oh, Bessie. I knew you'd come around. You're so wise. Of course, for Leo's sake. Why don't you come over for tea this afternoon? Leo would absolutely adore seeing you." The invitation for tea, after an attempted legal ambush, was audacious, but Eleanor expected nothing less. Arriving at the lavish apartment, Eleanor was greeted by Serafina, who wore a fixed smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The opulent surroundings, once shocking, now felt like a theatrical set for Serafina's latest act. Eleanor handed over a small bouquet of flowers, her gaze sweeping the pristine living room. As Serafina led her deeper into the apartment, towards what was presumably Leo's room, Eleanor noticed the family photos. There were several new ones, framed in silver and gold, depicting Leo with Serafina in various settings. At the park, on a beach, celebrating a birthday. But something was off. The child in the photos looked subtly different. Taller, perhaps. His features seemed a little sharper, his hair a darker shade of brown than the sunny blonde she remembered. Eleanor dismissed it as lighting, or perhaps the awkwardness of a child growing up. "Leo, look who's here," Serafina called out, her voice overly cheerful, as they approached a half-open door. A child peeked out from the room, his eyes wide and hesitant. He was a handsome boy, with Serafina's fair complexion, but the familiarity was elusive. The Leo Eleanor knew would have burst out of his room, shrieking with joy, and launched himself into her arms. This child remained shyly by the doorway, a small, uncertain smile playing on his lips. "Hello, Grandma Bessie," the boy murmured, his voice a little deeper than she remembered. Eleanor's heart ached with a terrible uncertainty. She knelt, opening her arms. "Oh, Leo, my darling." She hugged him tightly, pulling him into her embrace. The child felt different. He was definitely taller than she remembered from their last visit a few months ago, his small frame more solid. His hair was indeed darker, and his face, when he pulled back slightly, was more angular, less round and cherubic than her Leo. A cold dread began to creep through Eleanor, an icy tendril of suspicion that made her breath catch. "Leo," Eleanor began gently, looking into his eyes, trying to find the familiar spark. "Do you remember when we went to the zoo last Christmas? And you loved the elephant so much? And we bought that big, cuddly stuffed elephant?" The boy looked confused, his brow furrowing slightly. "I don't remember that, Grandma," he said honestly. "I like elephants, but I don't have a stuffed one." Eleanor's blood chilled. Her Leo cherished that elephant. He slept with it every night. He even had a name for it. Jumbo. This child did not know Jumbo. Serafina, who had been watching them with a strained smile, quickly interjected, her voice sharp with forced casualness. "Oh, Bessie, you know how kids are. They forget things. So much stress lately. With everything." She shot Eleanor a warning glance, but Eleanor barely registered it. Her focus was entirely on the child and the terrible, undeniable truth that was forming in her mind. "Can I see your room, Leo?" Eleanor asked, her voice calm, almost unnervingly so, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. "Of course, honey," Serafina quickly agreed. Too quickly. The boy led Eleanor into his room. It was indeed a child's room, but it was filled with brand new, expensive toys. A top-of-the-line gaming console. A remote-controlled drone. Elaborate Lego sets. But there was nothing familiar. None of Leo's old belongings. His worn copies of favorite storybooks. The collection of brightly colored rocks he'd painstakingly gathered. His slightly chipped ceramic piggy bank shaped like a rocket ship. And most glaringly absent, there was no framed photograph of Leo with Arthur. A precious memento that had always sat on his bedside table. Eleanor's gaze fell upon a complex robotics kit, still in its box, clearly intended for an older child, perhaps 8 or 9 years old. Her Leo, at 5, was bright, but he was years away from something like this. She picked it up, the plastic cool against her trembling fingers. She turned slowly, directly facing Serafina, who stood rigidly in the doorway, her smile now completely gone, replaced by a mask of apprehension. Eleanor's voice was quiet, but it resonated with a steel that cut through the carefully constructed facade. "Sarah," she said, her eyes locked on Serafina's. "I need to ask you something. And I need you to be completely honest with me." Serafina's face went white, her composure cracking. "Is this really Leo?" A gasp escaped Serafina's lips, a sound of pure terror. She opened her mouth to speak, but Eleanor didn't wait. She gently knelt beside the boy, taking his small hand in hers, her voice full of a heartbreaking tenderness. "Honey," she asked, looking directly into his innocent eyes, "can you tell me your daddy's name?" The boy, sensing the sudden tension in the room but unaware of its true gravity, looked from Eleanor to Serafina, then back to Eleanor. "My daddy's name is Ethan," he replied, his voice clear and simple. Eleanor's world tilted on its axis. The air left her lungs. The truth, raw and devastating, crashed over her. This wasn't Leo. Her grandson was gone. Serafina had not only stolen her money, but she had stolen her grandson, replacing him with a stranger, a cruel stand-in for a life that was now utterly shattered. The true horror of Serafina's deception, its incredible scope and heartless cruelty, finally revealed itself. Eleanor stood frozen, the boy's innocent words, "My daddy's name is Ethan," echoing in the sudden, shattering silence. Her world, painstakingly rebuilt after Arthur's death, splintered into a million pieces. The air in the opulent apartment grew heavy, suffocating. She looked from the bewildered child to Serafina, whose face was a mask of terror. All pretense finally stripped away. Eleanor's voice, when it came, was a low, guttural growl, barely recognizable as her own. "Explain this, Serafina," she demanded, her finger trembling as she pointed towards the living room. "Explain this right now." Serafina let out a whimper, her carefully constructed composure finally shattering. She stumbled backward, collapsing onto the plush sofa, burying her face in her hands. Her carefully styled hair, her expensive dress, her flawless makeup, they all seemed grotesque, a cruel mockery of the truth. "I never meant for it to go this far," she sobbed, her voice muffled and broken. "Eleanor, please, you have to understand. After Arthur died, I was so lost. The bills, the loneliness. I didn't know what to do." Eleanor felt a surge of cold fury. "Lost? So you decided to lie? To manipulate? To steal? To fabricate medical emergencies for money? To pretend my grandson was sick?" Serafina lifted her head, her face tear-streaked and contorted. "Yes, I did. I made up the emergencies, the medical bills. I was desperate. But Leo is real, Eleanor. He's your grandson. He's Arthur's son. I promise you that. Then who is that child in there? Eleanor demanded, her voice rising, pointing an accusing finger towards the bedroom door. The boy, Liam, sensing the escalating tension, had retreated back into the room. Serafina squeezed her eyes shut, then opened them, fresh tears streaming down her cheeks. That's Liam. My nephew. He's my brother Ethan's son. Ethan and his wife are traveling, and I was watching him for a few weeks. She took a ragged breath. When you started getting suspicious about the money, Eleanor, and demanding to see medical reports, I panicked. I knew I couldn't produce any, so I sent Leo to stay with my mother in Phoenix. Just for a little while. I swear. Until I could get things sorted, until I had enough money to be truly independent, so I wouldn't have to rely on anyone anymore. Eleanor stared at her, utterly devastated. The audacity, the casual cruelty of it, stole her breath. You sent away my grandson, she whispered, the words burning her throat. My real grandson? So you could continue to steal from me? So you could put up this elaborate charade and attempt to strip me of everything I own? The wound of betrayal was deep, a gaping chasm in her heart. All the years of love, of support, of trying to be a compassionate mother-in-law, had been met with calculated deceit. No, Eleanor, it wasn't like that, Serafina wailed, scrambling to her feet. It was just temporary. I was going to bring him back. I promise. I just needed more time. I was going to tell you the truth, eventually. I just needed to secure our future first. Our future. Eleanor? Leo's future. Secure your future? Eleanor scoffed, a bitter, hollow sound. By replacing my grandson with another child and attempting to swindle me out of my life savings? No, Serafina. This ends. Now. Eleanor looked directly into Serafina's tear-filled eyes. I want to see Leo. I want to see my real grandson now. Call your mother. Put him on the phone. Tell her I'm coming. I can call her, Serafina stammered, fumbling for her phone. But please, Eleanor, don't just leave. We can talk about this. We can still work something out. There's nothing more to talk about, Eleanor stated, her voice cold and resolute. She no longer trusted a single word that came out of Serafina's mouth. I'm going to Phoenix. Myself. She turned and walked towards the door, leaving Serafina's desperate pleas and fresh sobs echoing behind her. As Eleanor pressed the elevator button, her mind raced. The full scope of Serafina's deception was staggering, almost unbelievable. But now, a new, even more terrifying thought began to form in her mind. A seed of doubt that Miss Davy's attorney, Mr. Kane, had planted during their conversation. If Serafina had lied about Leo being sick, about his treatments, about needing money, about everything, then what else had she lied about? Was Leo truly Arthur's son? Eleanor knew she needed professional help. This was too big, too complex, too emotionally charged for her to handle alone. The next morning, she contacted Robert Kane, a private investigator recommended by Miss Davies. Mr. Kane was a former police detective who specialized in family matters, renowned for his discretion and thoroughness. During their initial consultation, Mr. Kane listened patiently to Eleanor's harrowing account, his expression grave. When she finished, he leaned forward, his gaze direct and empathetic. Mrs. Thompson, he began, his voice calm but firm. There's something we need to prepare for. Given the extent of Serafina's deceptions, we need to consider every possibility. When Leo was born, did he strongly resemble Arthur? Or were there ever any lingering doubts, however small, about his paternity? Eleanor felt a sickening lurch in her stomach. The question, delivered with such quiet directness, struck a deep, unsettling chord within her. Resemblances. She had always wanted to see Arthur and Leo, had actively looked for them, but in retrospect, she couldn't deny that Leo had always looked more like Serafina, with her fair skin and light eyes. Arthur had been darker, with a more prominent nose. Eleanor pushed the thought away, horrified. No. She couldn't even contemplate that. But Mr. Kane's question hung in the air, a chilling harbinger of a deeper truth she was about to uncover. The morning after Eleanor's meeting with Robert Kane brought a new layer of dread, a chilling sense of anticipation. Her phone rang precisely at 9, as agreed. It was Mr. Kane. His voice was calm, professional, yet carried a gravity that made Eleanor's heart pound. "Mrs. Thompson," Mr. Kane began without preamble. "I've started digging. My first priority is to confirm the identity of the child you've been raising, the one you believed was Leo, but who Serafina now claims is Liam. Do you have anything that contains his DNA? A lock of hair? A baby tooth? Anything from when he was very young?" Eleanor's mind raced, sifting through years of memories. "A lock of hair," she murmured, a flicker of memory igniting. "Yes, his very first haircut. I saved it. It's in his baby book, tucked away with his hospital bracelet and other keepsakes." She had kept that book meticulously, a tangible link to Arthur and his supposed son. "Excellent," Mr. Kane said. "Please get that to me as soon as possible. We'll need it for DNA testing." The implication of his request, though carefully worded, hit Eleanor with the force of a physical blow. The unspoken truth hung in the air, cold and stark. "You want to test whether Leo is really Arthur's son, don't you?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, the question she had been too terrified to voice aloud finally escaping her lips. "It's the only way to know for certain, Mrs. Thompson," Mr. Kane confirmed, his tone empathetic but firm. "Given everything Serafina has done, we cannot assume anything at this stage. We need concrete proof to determine if this child is actually your biological grandson, Arthur's son." Eleanor felt a wave of nausea. The seed of doubt Mr. Kane had planted during their first meeting had now taken root, growing into a terrifying possibility. She promised to deliver the hair sample immediately. "In the meantime, I've run some preliminary background checks on Serafina," Mr. Kane continued, "and I've found some interesting discrepancies. First, regarding her claim about sending Leo to her mother in Phoenix. There's no record of Serafina's mother living in Phoenix, or anywhere in Arizona for that matter. In fact, her mother passed away 5 years ago, 2 years before Arthur's death. And she has no other known family members in that state. So, she lied about that too." Eleanor closed her eyes, a fresh surge of disgust washing over her. Serafina's web of deceit was far more tangled, far more extensive than she could have ever imagined. It wasn't just about money, it was about a meticulously constructed alternate reality. "But it gets more complicated," Mr. Kane went on, his voice serious. "I found records of Serafina living with a man named Ethan Reed for 2 years before she married Arthur. And they had a child together." Eleanor gasped, her breath catching in her throat. "Ethan Reed. The name the child Liam had given. Liam's father?" she whispered, her mind racing to connect the dots. "Precisely," Mr. Kane confirmed. "This son, Liam, was born approximately 6 months before the alleged birth of Leo. And here's the crucial part, Mrs. Thompson. After extensive searches through state and national databases, there's no birth certificate for a Leo Thompson. None at all. It's as if he never existed." The words struck Eleanor like a lightning bolt, shattering the last fragments of her understanding of reality. Her world spun, the years of memories, of unconditional love for her grandson, collapsing around her. "So," she choked out, her voice trembling, "so Serafina took Ethan Reed's son, told me he was Arthur's, and has been using him to steal from me for 3 years, pretending he was my grandson?" The sheer, unfathomable depravity of the act left her reeling. "That's what the evidence suggests," Mr. Kane stated gravely. "It appears Liam was taken by Serafina shortly after she met Arthur. It seems the plan to pass him off as Arthur's son was in motion very early on." Eleanor felt a cold, empty ache in her chest. The betrayal was monumental, a wound that would never fully heal. She had grieved for a son, only to be deceived about his child. But then, Mr. Kane delivered the final, most devastating blow, the one that annihilated any lingering hope. And there's one more thing. Mrs. Thompson, Mr. Kane said, his voice softer, gentler, as if bracing her for impact. I managed to access some of Arthur's medical records from his last physical, approximately a year before he met Serafina. He had a pre-existing medical condition, one that would have made it virtually impossible for him to father children. Eleanor's grip on the phone tightened until her knuckles were white. The world outside her window blurred. She didn't need a DNA test. She knew. She had never had a grandson through Arthur, the child she had loved, nurtured, and showered with affection for 5 years. The child she believed was the last living piece of her beloved son was not her blood. He was merely a prop in Serafina's elaborate, cruel scam. And what about Ethan Reed? Eleanor asked, her voice hollow, devoid of emotion, the shock turning into a chilling resolve. Liam's father. Did you find him? Yes, I did, Mr. Kane replied. He's currently in county jail for check fraud. He's been there for the last 6 months. But he's been searching for his missing son, Liam, for the past 3 years. Ever since Serafina disappeared with him, a profound, unexpected emotion welled up in Eleanor. Not anger for herself, but a fierce, protective instinct for Liam. This innocent child, used and manipulated, separated from his real father, her mission had shifted. She was no longer fighting for her grandson, because her grandson never existed. Now, she was fighting for Liam, to find him, to protect him, and to reunite him with his real father. The thought of that little boy, confused and alone, spurred her forward with a renewed, unshakable determination. The sterile, fluorescent-lit walls of the county jail visiting room felt like a fitting backdrop for the raw, unsettling truth Eleanor was about to confront. Beside her, Mr. Kane projected an air of calm authority. Across the grimy plexiglass, a man with tired eyes and a gaunt face was led in by a guard. This was Ethan Reed, Liam's father. As Ethan settled onto the stool, his gaze swept across the room, then landed on Eleanor. A flicker of recognition, followed by a profound sorrow, crossed his face. "You're the woman," he said, his voice hoarse. "The woman who's been taking care of Jake." He used the name Liam's father had for him, a name Eleanor hadn't known. Eleanor's heart ached. A new, different kind of pain. All the love she had poured into that child, the years of believing he was Arthur's son, now felt like a cruel irony. I didn't know," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I thought he was my grandson, Leo. I honestly believed he was Arthur's son." Ethan nodded, a weary understanding in his eyes. He didn't accuse. He simply acknowledged her pain. "Serafina. She's good at making people believe things." He ran a hand over his face. "Jake is a good boy. He's 5 now, right? He loves dinosaurs, and he can't get enough of chocolate ice cream. He's amazing with building blocks, always building these elaborate towers. He used to call me Papa." A wistful smile touched his lips, quickly fading. Mr. Kane interjected, his voice crisp. "Mr. Reed, we believe Serafina's current plan is to secure all of Mrs. Thompson's assets, then disappear with Liam. She's living well beyond her means, and she has a history of fleeing when her scams unravel." Ethan's face, already pale, turned ashen. "We have to stop her," he said, his voice urgent, a desperate plea for his son. Eleanor met his gaze, her own eyes blazing with resolve. "We're going to," she stated firmly. "We have a plan." She laid out her idea. She would call Serafina, feign capitulation, and agree to sign the asset transfer documents. But instead of meeting at the apartment, she would insist on a public place. A park, claiming it was for Leo's comfort, and so they could have a normal family outing before the formalities. This would give them the opportunity to intervene safely. As they refined the plan, Ethan shared more about Serafina, filling in the terrifying gaps. "She took Jake because I was trying to get full custody," he revealed, his voice laced with bitterness. She was using drugs, neglecting him. I was building a case against her, and she just disappeared with him. 3 years ago. I've been searching ever since, but I never had the resources to find them. Mr. Kane confirmed Ethan's story, adding his own findings. Serafina has been running similar scams in other cities, using Liam to gain the sympathy and trust of other elderly individuals, then defrauding them. This isn't her first rodeo. The full portrait of Serafina, a cold, calculating criminal, solidified in Eleanor's mind. The tenderness she had once felt, even the residual anger, was replaced by a profound sense of outrage and a fierce determination for justice. Not just for herself, but for all of Serafina's victims, especially Liam. The next day, the plan was set in motion. Eleanor made the call, her voice carefully rehearsed to sound defeated. Serafina, ecstatic at the apparent victory, readily agreed to meet at Central Park, convinced Eleanor was finally caving in. At the park, the scene was idyllic, almost disturbingly so, under the bright autumn sun. Liam, oblivious to the unfolding drama, played in the sandbox, happily building a castle. Serafina, looking triumphant, was getting coffee from a nearby vendor, leaving Liam momentarily unattended. This was Eleanor's chance. She walked over to the sandbox, her heart pounding. She knelt beside Liam, her voice soft, gentle, imbued with all the love she had held for him. "Jake," she whispered, using his real name for the first time. "I know who you really are. And your papa has been looking for you." Liam looked up, his innocent eyes wide. A toy shovel paused mid-air. "Papa?" he asked, his voice barely audible. Then his eyes filled with tears, unshed but shimmering. "You know where Papa is?" Eleanor gently took his hand. "Yes, darling. He's very close. He loves you very much. And he's going to be here soon. But first, some friends are going to come to help us. They're going to make sure you're safe," she reassured him, preparing him for the sight of uniforms, for the necessary disruption. Just then, Serafina returned, a triumphant smirk on her face. Before she could utter a word, a plainclothes detective, followed by uniformed officers, moved in with swift, professional efficiency. "Serafina Reed," Detective Miller announced, flashing his badge. "You're under arrest for kidnapping, child endangerment, and multiple counts of fraud." Serafina's face went from triumph to shock, then to pure, unadulterated rage. She struggled against the handcuffs, screaming at Eleanor. "This is your fault, Bessie! You destroyed our family!" Eleanor looked at her, her gaze steady, devoid of pity. "You destroyed it," she replied, her voice calm and clear. "The day you decided to use a child as a weapon." As Serafina was led away, another figure emerged from the crowd, his eyes scanning frantically until they landed on Liam. "Jake!" Ethan cried, his voice choked with emotion. Liam looked up, his face breaking into a radiant, joyful smile. "Papa!" He scrambled out of the sandbox, running into Ethan's outstretched arms. The reunion was profoundly emotional, a testament to a father's enduring love and a child's resilience. 3 months later, Eleanor received a small envelope in the mail. Inside was a crayon drawing, a stick figure labeled Papa, a smaller one labeled Me, and another, slightly larger figure with a kind smile, labeled Grandma Friend Bessie. Below it, a heartfelt letter from Ethan. He thanked Eleanor for everything, for her courage, her compassion, for reuniting him with his son. He wrote that Liam was happy, thriving, and resilient. Already adjusting to life with his father, he invited Eleanor to visit any time, not as a grandmother, but as a cherished friend and a hero. Eleanor hung Liam's drawing on her refrigerator, a place of honor. She looked at it, a gentle smile gracing her lips. The ache in her heart for Arthur's lost legacy remained, a faint echo of what might have been, but in its place, a new sense of peace, a quiet strength, had grown. She had faced the darkest betrayal, unmasked the grandest scheme, and in doing so, had found a new kind of family, a new purpose. She was strong enough to face the truth, strong enough to put a child's welfare above her own emotional needs, and strong enough to move forward, not defined by what she had lost, but by the justice she had found.